Hi and welcome to Intrepid Wisdom. My name is Deborah J and today we're going to be speaking to Jen Smollett. Jen is a Senior Practitioner Coach, an NLP coach and an ex-children's intensive care nurse. She's passionate about coaching and guiding women through their own unique journey of self-discovery, which allows those women to find fulfillment and inner peace. So Jen, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about, I suppose our focus really is looking at life purpose. It's looking at the divine feminine energy, role models that we had in our life, you know, the journey that we have and kind of how we get to where we are. So do you want to give us a little bit of background about who you are and how you've come to do what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So it's really interesting because actually you and I connected over me sharing a story with you around my past that I actually for many, many years buried deep down as not really being that important. And actually in this conversation right now, I realize that it is really important. And so I guess my story starts back when I was a teenager and I was bullied at school throughout my teenage years. So pretty much from year 7 all the way through to year 10. And then halfway through my GCSEs, I had a conversation with my dad where he, you know, I was just a mess actually, and he said, right, that's it, you're not going back to school. And so I moved schools halfway through my GCSEs, and that was the point, I think, when I realized how I needed to live my life. And so from 15 until probably around 3 years ago, I spent many years learning and figuring out just how I needed to be to have friendships in the world, to be liked by other people. And so, you know, I was a great chameleon. I knew, you know, within a few minutes of talking to somebody, how I needed to be to make that person like me. And then I started to learn how I needed to keep friendships going. And actually, I did that really successfully for many years. And at the same time, not at the same time, I also became a children's nurse. So I qualified as a children's nurse in 2008. Prior to that, actually, I did want to be an actress on the West End stage. I thought I was amazing. I used to do, I really loved it. I did amateur dramatics when I was a teenager, which I think held me because that was outside of school. But I did that and I went to drama school, and then I realized I really wasn't that great. So it was just like, what do I do? What do I do with my life? I want to be an actress. And then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I've got nothing.
You have to combine it to the bedroom with a hairbrush and then that's it.
Yeah, exactly, which is all it is now. So I kind of was a bit stuck, and my then boyfriend's mum was a nurse, and she said to me, what about nursing? You know, you can be a children's nurse. And I was like, oh yeah, great idea. So I became a nurse, and actually that really worked for me in that kind of wanting to please people, wanting to be there for people, you know, the compassion, the empathy, all of those skills that I'd learned actually and continued to learn, I brought into my nursing as well. And that was very much kind of, I suppose, who I was a nurse. You know, I was Nurse Jen, and that was my identity for a long time. And actually giving in my personal life, giving in my work life, I reached a point where I actually went on to do a role as a ward sister, but as an educator in children's intensive care. And it was actually really difficult. I wanted to make a lot of changes that couldn't happen. And I found myself pushing in all different directions. And actually I burnt out. You know, I reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore. And that was the point where I realized I didn't want to be a nurse anymore. And at the same time, I realized that if I wasn't a nurse, I didn't know who I was. You know, all of a sudden I was like, well, who is Jen if she's not Nurse Jen? And it kind of, I suppose, ensued into a bit of a spiral downwards, really, where I ended up having some time off work, and I was diagnosed as, they give it an umbrella term of stress, anxiety, and depression. And I use this because I think it's not a very specific term, but that's what it was. And I started taking antidepressants then. And that actually was a point where I realized that I needed to I needed to do something myself. You know, I needed to figure myself out. I needed to know who Jen was, not nurse Jen and not friend Jen and, you know, daughter Jen and all of those different roles, but I needed to know who I was. And so that was my journey, I suppose, or the start of my journey into my self-discovery, probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. Yeah, and now at 36, finally, you know, even now I kind of, sometimes I get to the end of the day and I think, you were wearing a bit of chameleon there. You know, I feel like I've done it. I feel like I've done the work and I've got it. And then I'm like, no, I still need to work on that, you know.
Do you know, that's
years and years of
that
learning.
point by itself is so important, because I think one thing that I realized in my own lifetime has been very much, just because you learn something once, it doesn't mean that that's it for the rest of your life. You know, you can't go to the gym when you're, you know, 20 and go, oh, that's great, I've all the work done now for the rest of my whole entire life. It's a muscle, like, and it's a memory muscle. And I found with certain things in my own life, when I learned them and I'm like, oh my God, aha, like it's a total wow, like aha moment. And I'm like, oh, that's it, it's changed my life. And I'll do it for a couple of weeks and then I'll somehow slip back into old habits, and time will go on and I'll be like, what was that thing that made me feel better? And then I'll rediscover it again and I'll be like, oh, that thing. And then you use it again, and you tend to, I think the more you forget it and pick it back up, the more of a habit it becomes, and eventually it actually just sticks. But I think part of the process is forgetting, and then remembering and forgetting and relearning over and over again. So it's really, that's quite interesting as well. So what was your stage, or how did it move from there?
So I was fortunate, I suppose, in that whilst that was happening, that kind of part of me was feeling like I was, you know, burning out at work. At the same time, there was a coaching course that was on offer, and actually I hadn't realized it before, but so as a nurse, you kind of do a mentorship qualification very quickly in your nursing career. And so you mentor nurses coming into the profession and student nurses. And I'd done that, and then I'd become an educator. So I love seeing other people grow. I love people having those aha moments, but mostly that was aimed around nursing. And so I've been an educator for a few years, and essentially I've been coaching. You know, I taught through asking questions, and so I had been coaching. And then I saw this coaching course, and I decided that actually that could be something that I could do, as well as, you know, maybe a nursing coaching role. And so I did the qualification, and actually the first day of the qualification, they said something about finding people to coach for free as part of the how to learn to be a coach, essentially. And they said this would be a great way of offering people as a starting to build your business, your coaching business. And I was like, sorry, what? You can be a coach? I literally had no idea that was even something that I could, you know, I could do. And so I did the year-long course, which actually kind of, I left nursing, or I left my role, my position in the NHS at that point, and continued to do that training course. And actually, it was like the coaching course sped up my own self-discovery. You know, in the first bit of time, all of a sudden realizing how I could help others allowed me to help myself.
Wow.
And also allowed me to recognize coaching and what coaching can do for you. And so, you know, I worked with a coach on myself, and I learned and explored all of the things that I was kind of learning that I would coach with other people, and did that with myself. And so that was, I guess, it all happened, just happened naturally at the right time, at the perfect time, actually, for me. And then I did the self-discovery journey through the coaching kind of qualification, which was a year long. And then that allowed me to then be able to kind of coach other women through that self-discovery, which is how I kind of became a coach, and also why I have narrowed right down, I suppose, to that being the focus of the work that I do with people, because I've done it, you know, I've lived it. I'm living it, actually, I should say, because I think that's authentic, that we continue on that journey. So yeah, that kind of brought me here. Yeah,
that's kind of part of it as well. Like, I know for myself, trying to figure out this whole life purpose thing, because it's such a buzzword, and it is, and look, I use it as well, so I I can't say I don't, I totally do.
Yeah.
But I do think there's this whole thing of your mess is your message. And so the things that you've, you know, succeeded, challenged, and kind of risen above in your life, really, that's probably the thing that you can help others with most. And like, that's your niche because you've gone through it. And even if you didn't have a qualification, you'd still be qualified to be able to speak with people about it to some end because of the fact that you've gone through it yourself. And I think as well with bullying, and we spoke about this just before you came on, we were saying, you know, bullying is made out in school. It's like, oh, it's bullying. It's just every child goes through it. Every child does go through it. It doesn't make it okay. And it affects different children differently. And I think, you know, if you have a child and they're anyway sensitive or emotionally just a little bit more softer in nature as well, it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it easier for any kid. But like, what's your opinions on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, I feel like it's only really as I've kind of done more work that I've actually kind of allowed and embraced that part of my story, because, you know, I don't want to get emotional, but I can kind of feel the emotions coming on as we're talking, because actually I wasn't heard. And I was taught that everybody gets bullied. I was taught that it was no big deal. You know, when it was happening for many years, I had, you know, my mum is amazing. She's a wonderful woman in many, many ways. But actually, I felt like her approach to me being bullied was, you need tougher skin. You need to, you know, better deal with it. You need to change the way that you are to be able to continue to go to school. Having said, you know, I feel bad saying that, because actually on the other hand, she also towards the end would drive me to school to drop me off late, and she would pick me up at lunchtime and then drop me off after lunchtime and then pick me up early to avoid kind of being with the bullies outside of the classroom. So, you know, she did amazing things for me. But the one thing was that it was definitely, I had to change me to deal with the bullies. And then after that, you know, I remember even at drama school, you know, I kind of said something to somebody, and, you know, I was like, you know, I was quite badly bullied at school. You know, I had to move schools because I was bullied. And it was like, oh yeah, like bullying's awful at school, you know, everyone's bullied. And I think those experiences, you know, like as time went on, the more I mentioned it, or rather whenever I mentioned it, it was kind of like pushed back down. And so I started to think that actually, yeah, you're right. It's nothing. It just needs to be pushed down. It's just part of life, you know? And now I think, gosh, but pushing it down was a big part of how I didn't cope with it. You know, pushing it down was a big part of why I didn't allow myself to feel those really, really hard feelings. You know, I learned to hate myself. I used to cry myself to sleep because I didn't like who I was, because I was so unlikable that people were bullying me. And I held that in here, and I didn't deal with it. I didn't go there because of this belief that actually, yeah, everyone's bullied, it's no big deal. And it is a big deal.
It is a big deal, absolutely. And this is interesting because this is how we ended up connecting, because it wasn't anything to do with bullying. It was just to do with the show, and we were looking for these intrepid wisdom, women of wisdom. But I myself had bullying in school, and my bullying was in primary school, so it was kind of at a younger age. And it was in a small school. So for me, I think I had maybe 6 other girls in my class and 2 boys, something like that.
Wow,
and they
really
all
small.
Yeah, really, really small. We're in Ireland here. It's in rural Ireland. And for me, I had eczema. I was covered, you know, head to foot in eczema, and went to school in bandages. But that was so normal for me. So I didn't really know why other kids didn't like me. And I actually think the bandages were probably really just an excuse anyway. They just didn't like me. And like you, exactly as you're saying, eventually you kind of begin to, your inner voice gets you in trouble, because your inner voice says, I'm okay, there's nothing, like your inner voice doesn't say I'm okay, there's nothing wrong with me. Your inner voice just goes, I'm going to be me. And then everybody doesn't like you. And you're like, these two things aren't marrying up. My outside world and my inside world are 2 different things. And you actually learn to switch off listening to your inner voice, because it gets you in trouble, because it just puts head first into situations where people are going to judge you, hate you, mock you, exclude you, isolate you, whatever. And for me personally, I just got, you become an expert at reading people's energy.
Yes.
You become an expert at 2 seconds somebody comes into the room and you're like, oh, you don't like me. Or, you kind of, as you say, become a chameleon, and very much, and it's not intentional. For anybody listening to this, it's really, really important to understand that when we're talking about being a chameleon and talking about adjusting your behavior to, it's not to make other people like you, it's to stop them rejecting you. It's not a manipulation of them, make them like you. It's literally to avoid rejection. And it becomes really automated. It's as automated as breathing, and you don't realize that you're doing it. It's a survival mechanism, and it becomes so ingrained and so embedded and imprinted in your personality. You literally take that as being your personality, and you don't know any different until you get to 36 years of age. Like us. And then suddenly realize, oh wow, I could be a whole different other person and be okay with it. And if other people don't like me, that's their baby. Like, do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're so right there. I'm really pleased that you kind of touched on that thing of, it isn't at all manipulation, and there's no kind of conscious intention, actually no conscious intention there at all. It's all an unconscious need to not be rejected again.
Yeah. And perhaps you mentioned as well about boundaries. Boundaries is there's lots of these buzzwords that kind of float around the place, and they sound great in a sentence, and really, like, it should be obvious what a boundary is, but it's not if you don't know what boundaries are. If you know what boundaries are, it's going to be really obvious to you and you don't need to know. But can you explain from your own experience, what are boundaries, and what are your own experience on building boundaries, or how can you build them, and what's a healthy boundary?
Yeah, well, I think you're so right. I definitely knew what boundaries were. And then actually, until I realized what they were, and then I was like, oh yeah, no, I hadn't, I had no boundaries. And I guess if I use an example to share, that it might help people to kind of understand what I think boundaries are. And for me, it's kind of along the same lines of this people pleasing, I suppose, wanting people to like me, wanting people to not reject me. And one of the key things that I'd learned, I suppose, again, unconsciously learned, that to keep friends, I needed to be generous. I needed to give to my friends, because then they would stay friends with me, because that was what kept a friendship. Not that they liked me for who I was, but because I was generous. It's not actually true, but that's, that's where I was. And actually, the boundaries piece for me was that I never sat back and thought about what was acceptable in terms of how much I gave, as well as how much I could receive from the friendship. And so for me, it was giving, and then they remained my friend. And therefore, that was kind of the boundary that I set, which actually, if you think of it as on a scale of me here and the friend there, my boundary was right over here. It was at them. It was at what they needed. And I think boundaries for me is actually, it's about knowing what it is that you need and what it is that they need. And that is where the boundary sits. And actually, if what I need is here and what they need is going to pull me right over here, then this is the point here. This is the boundary where I have to think, do I want to cross that boundary? And sometimes, and I think, boundaries are fluid. Sometimes, yes, I do. Right now I'm going through, some things personally which are exciting, that I know that I don't have a lot to give to my friends right now, but they know that too. And because they're friends, they are respecting my boundary. And so right now, my friends that have got kids and things like that, they'll send me a photo every now and then. And then if I'm responding, they're like, hey, you don't need to reply. Or I'm like, I'm really sorry that I've not been in touch. And they're like, that's fine, Jen, we get it. It's okay. It's where you're at. And that is a healthy boundary for me, versus them being here and being like, hey, like, my kids are playing up, or, I'm a children's nurse. So people, I like to help people with their children and give advice, sometimes not.
Nurse on top, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that is where they are. And perhaps they could pull me right over there. And in the past, they would have pulled me right over there. not through their fault either. You've got to ask for what you want. And actually, it's my responsibility to hold my boundary and say, do you know what, actually right now, I can't give that. So I guess I've touched on quite a few different pieces there. But a key thing for me is also that you choose your boundary, but also, it can change. You can pull it back and you can push it further on. And it's your responsibility. Your boundaries are your responsibility, and I guess this is another thing. And I've actually had to teach my friends this, because for many years where I was here, they learned that was my boundary. So that's what they asked for, obviously, whereas actually I've kind of slowly realizing what boundaries are, I've slowly pulled myself back, which is why right now my friends are going, hey, Jen, it's fine. It's all good, because they now know that my boundary's here rather than over here. And that was a long-winded answer.
No, perfect. And the other part, like the two parts of it really, as you say, is one, knowing what your boundaries are, and two, communicating that, because people don't know what your boundaries are unless you tell them. And part of the reason many of us, and those who haven't had boundaries or don't have boundaries, the reason that they're overstepped all the time is because we don't know how to communicate it. It's probably one of the biggest problems of it. And if you're wondering what your boundaries are, it's what feels good and what feels bad. What gets you frustrated? When you're frustrated, it usually means somebody's well past your boundaries, but it is only you can set your boundaries. Only you can say, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to talk now, or I'm going silent for a few days, or do you know what, I don't want to go out tonight, or whatever. And I think it's experimenting as well. And if people aren't happy and aren't good with that, then you have to reevaluate, are they healthy for you in your life? And are you going to open up a line of communication where you can make that better, or do you let that go? And that's a really difficult part of the process as well, really. So boundaries are really, really huge. But the other thing as well that you'd mentioned to me, which I think is really important, which is the intrepid wisdom of it all, is it's okay to not be liked. And you mentioned me before. So how did you, when, it's very hard to pinpoint when did you figure that out, but when that started to change, what were people's reaction to you when you were like, it's okay, I don't need to be liked by everybody?
Yeah, can I pinpoint it? I don't know if I can pinpoint it, but I guess just to share my experience of that, actually. And I find it, and I guess I'm thinking of people listening to this, in the sense that I had heard that so many times. I had been told hundreds of thousands of times that it's okay for people to not like you. And I heard it here, or I heard it in my ears, but I didn't hear it in my heart, because I didn't believe it, and I couldn't believe it. It just had no truth whatsoever for me for so long. And actually, this is, like you say, the intrepid wisdom that I would love to impart on people. And actually, I think for me, it was when I realized that I don't really like everybody. I will always try to see the best in people, but there are some people that I don't gel with. There are some people that I think, well, I've had a coffee with you and I probably wouldn't really want to spend that much more time with you, because you have different values and you have different beliefs, or you have a different thought process around things. And I think it was almost, for me, I had to accept that first, because I previously also wanted to like everybody. I thought that you had to like everybody. And I thought, for me saying this, it meant that I'm a horrible person. So I think it was me accepting that I didn't like everybody else that then allowed me to be like, I could see that some of the people that I didn't necessarily like, that they were still good people. And I think seeing that the people that I didn't gel with and I didn't really like as still good human beings, and really good people, it allowed me to see that actually that could happen the flip side as well. That I can be here talking to you and I know that I'm a really good person. And if you and I gel, which, the conversation's flowing, we're gelling right now, and that's great. But actually, if you don't like me, okay, that's great. You're a good person and I'm a good person, and let's go and find other good people that we do gel with. And so I think it's accepting others and then allowing it myself.
And so, because this kind of feeds into, you know, a common theme as well for people who have those boundary issues, or who, you know, who are learning how to be in a relationship. If you meet somebody, it's a bit like dating. Like when you meet a new potential friend and you're getting to know each other, there's always that awkward conversation of, you know, letting it fizzle out if it's just not right for you, or, you know, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's, you know, it's the same thing as in a relationship. It's okay to not like other people, and even I found that as well. It's really awkward. It feels awkward initially to test that ground out, and it is testing. It's practice. It really is something that just needs to be practiced. So in terms of your coaching, how do you operate, or what's your, you know, who do you mostly work with, who are your clients? If somebody was interested in working with you, can you explain what it is that you do and the type of clients that you work with?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I work mostly with women. Well, I work with women, and mostly I work with women in their kind of mid 30s to late, well, in their 30s. And most of the time, they are professional women who have worked focused, just like I did with my nursing. They've focused their whole life on being the professional woman that they are, to the point where now actually they would perhaps start to wonder, actually, what is it that gives me the inner peace? What is it for me that will make me happy and make me feel fulfilled in my life? Because all they've ever done is focus on their career. So they are mostly the women that I work with through my coaching, and we work together through 12 sessions. Depending if they want it intensely or if they want to kind of have a bit more time, we'll either do it over 3 months or over a 6-month period. And that's one-to-one coaching online. So, you know, I can offer it around the world. And we will go through a process of that self-discovery. You know, it nearly always starts with exploring what your values are, your core values, and then we'll work around aligning who you are with the way that you live your life. And that flows really in terms of what it is that the person needs. So we've talked about boundaries quite a lot, and actually that's something that comes up in my coaching as well with women. You know, it's figuring out who you are, and then the next step is being brave enough and having the courage to be that person with other people. And that's where that boundary piece, you know, definitely comes in. So we will kind of do that whole exploration through who you are, and then how you can be you and accept who you are and be who you are in the world. So that by the end of that 6 months of us working together, you feel like you know who you are, but also that you can just be you. And that is, that's the magic. I suppose that's the magic that I love. And I have that as one option. And then another option that I do is a group coaching program or membership that I run, which is called Made to Be Me. And it is all about the women inside the group together braving this journey together. So they're exploring each other and themselves with group coaching, and then kind of being brave enough to be themselves in that group, which then means that they can then take that courage outside of the group and be themselves, who they were made to be outside in the world too.
Lovely, because that's a lovely platform for them to start at, because it's really intimidating to just go out into the world and go, right, I'm a new person,
This
authentic
is me.
now, this is me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice that you have a membership for that as well. Where do you run that membership from? Is it Facebook, or is it from your website, or?
Yeah, so it's currently closed. So because of the intimacy of it, I don't open it up all of the time. So currently it would be a wait list. So people to get onto the wait list. And then when I reopen it, I can kind of share that with people. But yeah, it's in Facebook, and then it's group coaching just on Zoom. Is the sessions twice a month.
And how
Yeah.
would you, for anybody who's listening at the moment who says, you know, that's me, I was bullied years ago and I definitely am a chameleon, and they can kind of half see that they are and they half see that they're not, and they kind of think,
Hmm.
you know, I want to figure out who I am, because it's a big
Yeah.
question. Like, some people are
Hmm.
like, what do you mean, who am I? I'm me, like I'm my
Yeah.
name and I'm the person who works at this job. We're not our labels. We are
Yeah.
completely different to what our labels are. What
Yeah.
tools could you recommend before, if somebody's literally only at the starting out phase, what
Hmm.
tools could you recommend to people to start using to build their confidence up, to maybe even work towards working with somebody like yourself?
Yeah, yeah. One, like my first step would absolutely always be to explore and uncover what your core values are. So I have a free workbook that can help you to do that, which I can share with yourself, and you can let the listeners know about that. But also, you know, just finding a values list. If you search values on Google, you know, there are lots of different values lists out there. And I would recommend just having a look at the list and going through and identifying, first of all, the ones that you think are that represent you. What I would say here is that the first time you do this, you will probably pick out all of the ones that you should be, rather than what you really, really are at your core.
That
And
should
so,
word, that should be banned. Should be
absolutely.
banned. It's a terrible word.
Totally
It's such
agree.
an oppressive word. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, the values, first of all, you'll identify what you should be. And then what I would love for you to do is put it to one side and almost forget about it for a few weeks, and then come back to it and think, actually, which are the ones that I really feel connected to? And
Mm-hmm.
think about why, and then just start to, I've heard the saying, kind of season your day with the value, you know. So if honesty is one of the ones that you connect with, then spend a day with honesty in the back of your mind and try it. You know, spend the day being as honest as you can at every opportunity and see how it feels. And if you feel like you reject it, then it's probably not one of your core values. And if it feels like you've had an amazing day and you can't quite put your finger on why, it probably is one of your core values.
You know, honesty is, it's an interesting one as well, because something that I've learned through the years myself has been very much, when we operate from the heart, and what I mean is when we're being honest, authentic and true to ourselves, and again, that
Yeah.
takes a little bit of time and discovery. It's always there, it's always waiting to be utilized. It's just what fear gets in the way of allowing
Yeah.
us to do it. But I do find whenever we operate from that space of heart-centeredness, what we get back will only and can only come back as love. And for anybody who, like, even to give you an example, you know, when I first started trying out this whole I'm going to speak my mind, and like, it doesn't mean I have to be horrendous and terrible to people, but it's more like, you know, we're all going to do this, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to hang on here and do this. That previous was like, I would have felt really, really anxious about opening up my voice, saying what I wanted to do, which was different to what everybody else wanted to do. Usually the only time it was met with opposition was when there was narcissistic people around. But generally, when you open up your heart and you put it out there and say, look, this is not what I want to do, I'm going to do something else, or this is what I'd like to do, does anybody want to do it with me? Whatever way you want to put it, generally it's received well. Or this
Yeah.
is my boundary, I don't want to, you know, I'm having a quiet day, I actually don't want to do anything today. And so when you're doing it from your heart, essentially what I'm saying is it comes back and people understand it. But if you're doing it from your head, it usually ends up in tears. It doesn't
Yeah.
work the same, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I would absolutely 100% agree with what you've just shared there. Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So you
definitely.
have a free workbook that we can add to the link down below, and we can share with
Yeah.
people as well. And if
Yeah,
people want to
absolutely.
contact you, how do they get in touch with you, Jen?
Thank you for asking. So I have a website which is www.mynamejensmollett.com.
as in www.jensmollett.com. 2 L's and 2 T's, I think, isn't it?
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, 2 L's and 2 T's. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
are you on Facebook as well, Instagram? And
I am. Yeah. So I'm not as active on Instagram anymore, but I do have a free Facebook group on Facebook, which is the Fulfilled Women Collective. And that is probably the best place to find me on social media. And I share a lot in there. And I actually go live once a week in there as well to share my kind of weekly tips for how to live authentically and be the best version of yourself.
Lovely. So if we have anybody who's looking to even just dip their toe in the water and kind of get a feel for what it might be like to start that journey, because it's you know, it's a very personal journey, they can dip into that Facebook group and just get a feel for who you are and what you do, and other women or other people in the group as well. Yeah,
Great. Totally.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story, because it's really inspirational. You know, we're not the only ones who go through this bullying, and it's not okay. It is okay, but it's not okay. But the important thing is there's lots of other people out there to support you. And coaching is just a fantastic way of working through it. You can literally release it and let it go and move on completely in your life and totally be free of it. And I myself will put my hand up and say, I've done it. If I can do it, I can promise you anybody can do it, because I thought I was the most stuck person on the planet, and it's totally possible. So thank you so much for coming on, and let's stay in touch. I'd look forward to seeing how things progress, and
wonderful.
We'll chat to you again soon.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
You.
Bye.
Bye.